Dodgers, 2025 World Series champions. Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to a post-World Series show for Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to welcome you. And in this edition, I'd like to just return for a couple of seconds, just amend my last episode, a couple of statistics that I wanted to bring you, and also go over some of the great Game 7s of all time in World Series history. But first off, a bit of a shout out to the Dodgers for winning their back-to-back World Series championships. First time since in the NL since the Reds, the big red machine era of 1975 and 76. And of course, repeated by or done last by the New York Yankees during those great, wonderful runs of the Derek Jeter and the core four of Mariano, Bernie Williams, and others on that great Yankee dynasty of the late 1990s and early 2000s. Anyway, I wanted to amend because I didn't want to forget this. Last week I was doing the episode where I was talking about, I saw an article by a baseball writer. I cannot find it in all my things, but basically the gist of the article was about, hey, listen, the Dodgers gave up 11 runs at game one. Is the staff really good enough to go the distance against the Blue Jays and win the series? So it got me thinking. So I went back and I did all the games that the Dodgers lost by 9 or more runs. And the reason why I used 9, it was more of just to give me more of research data. Anyway, to make a long story short, I took the Dodgers' record of 10 or more runs that they gave up in a game. They lost every one of those. There was 7 of them, with the exception of one. They won 14-11 on May 9th. Anyway, to make a long story short, I took those as game one, a la just like game one where the Blue Jays defeated the Dodgers 11-4. Then I took the ensuing 6 games and I calculated their win-loss record in those. And it came out to be 42-36, including the 5 series that the Dodgers surrendered 9 runs. And as I said, it gave me more data. Basically, it was about 78 games or half the season. Make a long story even shorter, the Dodgers surrendering 10 or more runs in those 6 games following that one loss, they won the series 5 out of 8 times for a .625 winning percentage. If you added on the other 9 run games, they were 8-5 overall. So they actually lost 3 of the 5. Still a winning record. And then what I did was I took their individual record, the next or the 6 games following, and totaled those. And in those 78 games, the Dodgers were 42-36 for a .539 winning percentage, which isn't bad. But of course, they won 93 games and had a .574 winning percentage. And as I told the viewers from last week, they did score more runs, but surrendered more defensive runs. I didn't calculate earned runs. I was just doing how much did the Dodgers give up. And my whole point was this. The Dodgers were able to overcome double-digit losses and win the next 6 games in a series and won those series 8 times out of 5, or actually 5 out of 8. And then if you add the 9. They were resilient. And I think my theory, or the facts that I laid out, and then my inferencing from that, determined that the Dodgers had a really good chance of winning the series, even being down 3-2. Well, I'm no Nostradamus, but the numbers really proved out the probability that the Dodgers would win. And sure enough, they did win. And as I said, what makes it remarkable is the fact that they won. They were down 3-2 going back to Toronto and won both games in Toronto, including surviving 11-inning game for Game 7 And boy, they survived that by inches, literally and figuratively. And but it just showed, and this is what my point was, that that one game, that I'll just say one writer or a pundit kind of panicked or questioned the Dodgers staff was a little bit over the top. And that if you take a look at the remaining 6 games, you'll see that the Dodgers pitched brilliantly. Actually, after the 18 inning thing, I even pointed out that starting from the game one debacle, the Dodgers had a 1.25, and they actually finished with a 3.22 ERA, which was much lower than their season total ERA. So the staff really did a tremendous job. So kudos to the Dodgers. Kudos to the Blue Jays, because it was a fun World Series. And now that's my segue, because I wanted to talk about the other Game 7s that have been played in baseball history. And of course, when I get the inspiration, and it's fun when I'm thinking about these, I love to do, like I said, the deep dive, the research, and all the rest of it. And actually, I went back and forth with my brothers over this whole Game 7, and actually the Game 3. I called it a classic. My brother did some debating with me on that, because I had called a similar 18-inning game back in 2018. I thought it was kind of boring, and we went back and forth. I guess you would say that we agreed to disagree. He made some good points. Obviously, he made some great points. There's one, listen, I'm very proud of the fact that I've been educated by 2 brilliant baseball fans who know their history, my brother Jim and my brother Ed. They really indoctrinated me into the America pastime, and that so much I appreciate. My love of baseball is because of my family. And although we don't see eye to eye on some things, that's the fun of, let's say, the Hot Stove League. It's the fun of just debating games and strategy and all the rest of it. And we kind of learned a lot, and about obviously each other, but about our tastes of games and all the rest of it. And as I had said to my brother Ed, listen, I didn't think the game in 2018 was all that wonderful. He didn't. He thought it was classic, but he's a Red Sox fan, so he was on pins and needles watching that game, even though the Red Sox lost. And I just felt that the 18-inning affair, and in actuality, I did fall asleep for both. So I'm recounting this, not as an eyewitness or a TV witness of it, but really accounting for watching videotape and really using the scoreboard and references, and also writers' opinion and perspective of the game, etc. So I just wanted to get that out there. Still doesn't mean I can't have an opinion about it. And I just thought this one was a little bit more marvelous. And as I stated, look, if I'm worried about the state of baseball, and I thought a game was boring, and now I kind of have a turnaround 3-4 years later of a similar 18-inning game, I think that really does give hope for baseball really gaining back or strengthening and growing their audience of baseball fans. Now, not everything baseball does, I agree with. Can you imagine if that 18-inning game was played maybe an hour and a half earlier? The whole nation would have been fixated on it, instead of half the nation going to bed. And the other nation, and the other part of the nation that did stay up bravely and courageously and fanatically to watch it almost go to 3 o'clock in the morning and then try to wake up for work, I give you kudos. I mean, that's amazing. So anyway, I would just want to just bring up that Game 7. That scenario of those two 18-inning games. Okay? Now, there have been 41 World Series Game 7 played, starting with 1912 when the Red Sox defeated the Giants 3-2. The big thing there, it went 8 games. Now, I'm just bringing this up right now, but in that, it's interesting because I was going to pick out my top 10 World Series games all time, and I really don't think I'm an expert enough to do that. So I'm just going to maybe highlight some of the ones that I remember or read up or were told by my brothers or other sources or read about. 1912, I know I'm old, but I wasn't around then. But I will tell you this. Game 7, or actually Game 8, because one game was rained out. Actually, it ended, wait a minute, I'm just looking for it right now. It was an 8-game series, pardon me. I pull back because originally the World Series was played over 9 games. How foolish of me to realize that. This Game 7, or as the Sporting News ranks it, the final game, which gave the Giants, or actually the Red Sox, the final and the championship, was Smokey Joe Wood against Christy Mathewson. Matheson actually lost 2 games in the World Series. He had earlier lost a 2-1 game to the Red Sox on October 12th. That was Game 5. And then, of course, he came back in Game 8, right? And it was basically, ready for this, really on 4 days rest, normal, and he lost 3-2 in the bottom of the 10th. Smokey Joe Wood would finish 3-1 in the series. Actually, yes, Game 2 was tied. You know what it is? Baseball Reference has a final at 6-6. It went 11. So the Giants do lose 4-3, even though it went 8 games, okay? In the last inning 10, here's what happened. Matheson went 9-2 thirds innings, gave up 8 hits, only 5 walks, struck out only 4. He gave up 3 runs. Only 1 was earned, as there were 6 total errors in the game. Smokey Joe came in relief and pitched 3 innings, gave up 1 run. He was in relief for Ubedient, who was, I'm just going to give you this a little bit, because I think I might even just do 2 episodes on this. He was 60-53 for his career, but in 1912, he only played 3 years. He was 20-9 with a 2.92 ERA. And I am sure he goes until 1915. He's probably drafted into the war. And Smokey Joe, love that name, Smokey Joe Wood. He would finish 117-57 with a 2.03 ERA. He won 3 World Championships and an ERA title with a 40.4 WAR. And I got to be honest with you, as I'm reading this and I'm thinking, he won 34 games in 1912. 34 games, had 10 shutouts, 35 complete games, and 1 save in 344 innings. Why this guy is not in the Hall of Fame is beyond me. He won 23 and 34 games over 2 years, basically going 57-22 with an ERA under 2, because it was 2.02 and 191, and pitched over 600 innings. And yet this guy is not in or even considered for the Hall of Fame. He finished, ready for this, 60 games over 500. You know, that would be an interesting thing. Does he have the most, who has the most wins over 500 and is not in the Hall of Fame? And I might just put Smokey Joe Wood up there. I think he does get hurt, and that's why his career is derailed, because age 27, he goes to Cleveland. He missed out on 1 year. I'm sure he went to the war. And he pitched in 1917. He's out 1918, comes back 1919 and 1920, and only has 1 decision in those 3 years. So I'm sure that Wood is more than likely affected by injury and probably the war. I don't know whether he got injured. And I've heard of him before. And I apologize, I didn't do a little bit more research. But, you know, when you go over these scorecards, some things just take you by storm. I was going to focus more on Christy Mathewson. And here I am talking about the winner of Game 8, which was in reality the 4th win for the Red Sox to give them the title. And Mathewson, I just want to tell you this. This was Mathewson was 373 and 188 in his career. He is a Hall of Famer, a 2-time Triple Crown winner. That's wins, ERA, and strikeouts, where you lead the league. And he did it twice. He did it in 1908, 37-11, 1.43 ERA with 390 innings pitched and 259 strikeouts. You know, the Triple Crown for pitchers is a little bit different because sometimes I'm a little confused. Is it innings pitched or is it strikeouts? And he led in all four categories. And then he does it again, or he did it in 1910 with 27 wins, a 1.89 ERA, and led in strikeouts. Actually, with 206. He led 3 straight years in strikeouts 5 times in his career. But I would assume, and I would measure, because it's his highest WAR, 11.8, 1908 when he was 37 wins, 11 losses, 771 winning percentage, 390 innings pitched with 56 games and 44 starts. I mean, he led in everything with 259 strikeouts. In this game, Matheson gives up the winning run in the bottom of the 10th inning. And it went like this. The Red Sox were up the Giants were up 2-1 going into the bottom of the 10th inning. Christy Matheson faces Clyde Engel. He reaches on an error, on a fly ball to deep center field. They give an error to the center fielder. And then Harry Hooper hits a fly. Steve Yerkes draws a walk. So now you have runners first and second. Then Tris Speaker singled. Engel scores to tie the game. How about that? Tris Speaker, one of the great players of all time. Duffy Lewis, who led the league in hitting one year, I think he hit .438, draws an intentional walk. So now you got runners first and second with 1 out. And Larry Gardner hits a fly ball to right field. Yerkes scores to win, scoring an unearned run on the sacrifice fly to give the Red Sox a 3-2 victory. Now, that's just one. And I want to bring it back to one where I can remember being talked about, and that's the 62 World Series. And that was between the Giants when they first moved out. They finally got a pennant in 1962, and they played the New York Yankees, one of their rivals, in that World Series. And that World Series, all right, the 1-0 final, there had been a number of, I think, days. There were 5 days where it rained. And the Yankees were up 3-2. Go back to San Francisco, Candlestick Park, and Billy Pierce spins a 5-2 win over Whitey Ford. And then in Game 7, Ralph Terry secures the win. He actually won 2 games in the series. He was 2-1, and he beat Jack Sanford, who was 1-2. The game was tight throughout, obviously. Let me just do this. And I'm just going to tell you this. Willie McCovey hit 200 in the series. He was 3 for 15 in 4 games that he played. Got to remember at that point, they had Cepeda and McCovey and Mays, and they had the 2 Alou brothers that were on the squad, Philippe and Matty Alou. So basically, McCovey, still young, rookie of the year in 59, was probably sad against the lefties. Anyway, he was 3 of 15. He had a home run in the series, a solo shot, and an RBI. But he comes out. Let me just set this up. Bobby Richardson, of course, makes a great play on it. And here's how it unfolds. It was 0-0 until the top of the 5th when the Yankees scratch out a run with a single by Bill Skowron, a single by Clete Boyer, a walk to Ralph Terry to load the bases. And then Tony Kubek hits a ground ball double play. The run scores. Kubek doesn't get an RBI, but the run scored on a double play, and then a weak pop-up in foul territory by Bobby Richardson. Now, why do I mention that? Because it will be Richardson who probably makes one of the great plays in World Series history. Bottom of the 9th, Matty Alou singles. Well, actually, he bunts his way on. Philippe Alou, his brother, strikes out against Ralph Terry. All right, come into the game. I'm gonna give you his stats for the game. Ralph Terry goes the distance. He strikes out swinging Chuck Hiller. Willie Mays with 2 out doubles to right field. Matty Alou to third base. All right. Baseball References describes it as a line drive to right field down the line. Alou stops at third base. And with 2 out, runners at second and third, the winning run at second in Willie Mays, Willie McCovey hits a scorcher. I mean, I think he even said at one point it was probably his hardest hit he ever, one of the hardest hits that he ever lashed. And Richardson had backed up on the lefty, pull hitting McCovey, and just moved, I think, either just a foot. And it was that foot that enabled him to make just really a catch. It turned it into a routine catch. Had he stayed at his former position defensively, probably would have had to dive for the ball. And then it would have been a 50-50 probability that maybe he doesn't make the catch. And of course, Willie Mays would not have been stopped around third base. He was coming home to score. McCovey, in his only World Series appearance, loses, and he unfortunately makes the final out in a heartbreaking loss for the San Francisco Giants. That year, Ralph Terry, who started the game, I just want to give you this. Terry that year, because I'm going to go back, Terry finished his career 107 and 99. He wins 2 World Series, 2 All-Star games, and he was the MVP of the 62 World Series, I believe. But in 1962, Terry had one of his best seasons, if not his greatest season in his baseball career. He wins 23 games, loses only 12, 6.57 ERA, 3.19 ERA, 39 starts, 14 complete games, leads the league in pitched innings, 298.2, but does lead the league in home runs with 40. Pretty amazing. In those 3 years for the Yankees, after being traded by the Kansas City A's in the 4 seasons, he goes 13, 29, 52, 69, and 45. All right. And then if you add on his 1963 season where he's 17 and 15, you're talking about a guy who's 86 wins for the Yankees. He's through in those 2 years, 23 and 12 and 17 and 15, over 500 innings, 566 innings. Pretty amazing. And then, boom, he gets traded to Cleveland, and basically, even though he goes 11 and 6 with Cleveland in 65, his career is basically over after that because he totals a record of 2 and 12. Actually, if he had left, I know it's always the if, he would have finished with a 105 and 87 record. Not bad. 3.62 ERA for his career. But he just had a brilliant year that year. Luck and design. Luck is one of the elements or results of design or organization. And the Yankees had it properly defensed and all the rest of it. Actually, Terry only surrendered 4 hits that day. Actually, 2 of them in that last inning. So he was 2 hitting the Giants over 8 innings. Pretty remarkable. All right. Another year I'd like to do. I'm going to go to 1940. Or actually, I'm going to go to 1968 first because I think this is a little fun. And I know a little bit more about 1968 and all the rest of it before I go to 1940 that involves the Reds. So I'm going to have some fun with that. And this was the year the Tigers, Mickey Lolich is the MVP, and he spins not 1, not 2, but 3 wins in the series, and they are all complete games. All right? All complete games. Here's what he did for the Tigers. Lolich, 3 games, 1.67 ERA, through 27 innings, only gave up 5 runs to the Cardinals, had 21 strikeouts and 6 walks in his 3 games, plus he hit a home run. I think it's his only home run of his career as well. So Lolich, I'm just looking for him right now. The Cardinals, they hit 242, the Tigers, during this season. And of course, I don't have Lolich's stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure in Game 7, let's just do Game 7, he beats Bob Gibson, who won 2 games previous in this series. In this series, or he doesn't hit a home run in this game, but I'm pretty sure Lolich, he went 0 for 4 against Gibson. But this was the game where Curt Flood slipped in center field, and that led to 3 of the 4 runs. They had a big inning in the 7th inning. Going into the 7th, it was a 0-0 game, and let's just recap that 7th inning. Nothing game. Mickey Stanley strikes out. Now remember, Stanley, what made this series pretty interesting too, was Mickey Stanley was inserted into the shortstop position so they could put Al Kaline, who had been hurt most of the year, into right field. It would be his only series appearance. They moved Northrup to center, and they had Willie Horton in left. And then they had Mickey Stanley playing short. And Stanley, we've talked about him, how he played 17 years all with the Tigers. Pretty interesting. Same with Northrup. Anyway, Stanley strikes out looking against Gibson. Al Kaline grounded out 5-3. Norm Cash, though, starts the rally with a single to right. Willie Horton comes up, singles to left. So now you got runners first and second with 2 out, and Jim Northrup, who I just mentioned, rips a triple to center. Now, Flood turns. You do see this in the replays. Flood turns, and he slipped. It's a shame because you don't know whether he would have caught the ball or not. I know that's a big if, but it was hit hard. And Northrup winds up with a triple. Cash and Horton score to give them a 2-0 lead. And then Bill Freeham doubled off Bob Gibson down the left field line, scoring Northrup. And then Don Wirt, of all people, Don Wirt. Think about that. That's a great trivia question. A guy who barely hit 236, I think, in his career, who winds up with the Seattle Pilots, and he is walked intentionally by one of the great pitchers of all time, not just all-time regular season, but all-time. And I've said this before, Gibson would always take the hill for me in Game 7 of the World Series. And Gibson walked him. And why? Well, put it in context. Lolich was up next, who was not a good hitter, even though he had a home run in this series. And Lolich strikes out looking. So they score 3 runs there. They immediately, and the big thing here, I like to talk about this. The Tigers do hold the Cardinals scoreless in the bottom. And I always think that's big. You know, when you score, can you hold the other team scoreless or, you know, at the very worst, give up 1, maybe at most 2 runs? Because if you can come away with a win in that inning, you feel pretty good about yourself. But when you stop the team entirely, it's a real psychological lift for you. And he faced Cepeda. Lolich struck him out. Mike Shannon, a good, solid player during those 60s runs for the Cardinals, reached on a fly ball error in center field. I believe it was Northrup. Tim McCarver, though, flew out to right to Al Kaline. And then Roger Maris popped up to shortstop to end the inning. And then really he gets Phil Gagliano, we've talked about him, shortstop, to ground out. Struck out Gibson. Amazing. Gibson stays in the game. He walked Brock. And then Julian Javier tried to bunt to get on, but he was third base to first, turned into a ground out. 1 more run scores, and it's Don Wirt. And this is one of the things I was talking to my brother about. He loved the fact that it was Mike Muncy who hit a home run, even though it beat the Red Sox. And I was not chastising it, but I said it was a career year. Usually you want the home runs, the big hits to be done by future Hall of Famers. And that was, to me, the difference with the 18-inning game with the Dodgers is that Freddie Freeman, who I would say right now is a lock to make the Hall of Fame, gets the big hit. In Mike Muncy, and this is not a knock against Muncy, he's just a good, solid player. Happened to have his career year in 2018 at 35 home runs and all the rest of it, and he winds up hitting a home run off the Red Sox pitcher. And Don Wirt happens to single to center to drive in Dick Tracewski, who had come in to pinch run for Willie Horton The whole thing is set up this way. Cash, who had started the rally for the 3-run rally, flies out. Then Willie Horton singles. Willie Horton had 2 big hits here in these rallies. He's replaced by Dick Trzaskowski, who would become a first base coach for the Tigers for a number of years. Northrup would single to center, so he would make up for his mistake later on. Bill Freehan would pop up to the first baseman, and then Don Wirt with 2 outs would single to center. Now, it's one thing to get an intentional walk early, but then it's another to get a single off a Hall of Fame pitcher like Bob Gibson. And here's the interesting thing. Would you have loaded the bases to face Mickey Lolich, who would pop out to the second baseman? Now, it's really academic at this point because it's 4-0, but if you keep it within that 3-0 range, who knows? And of course, in the bottom of the 9th, trailing 4-0, Mike Shannon, with 2 outs, hits a home run off Mickey Lolich, prevents the shutout from occurring, gives some small token of success for the Cardinals hitters. Mike Shannon would hit a home run, and that was it. Game 7 was over. The Tigers rallying from down 3-1 and winning in St. Louis twice, kind of like the Dodgers, to defeat and actually the Cardinals were a nemesis for the Tigers. They had faced them a couple of times, and we'll go to that, actually. 1934, Cardinals and the Tigers hook up for another World Series. And this one is famous, the Game 7, not because of, let's say, the brilliance of the game per se, but because St. Louis defeats them 11-0 in the final. Now, Game 1 was taken by Cardinals, 1-0 in Tiger Stadium, or Briggs. Tigers get revenge, so it's split. They go back to St. Louis. The Cardinals win 4-1. Tigers win Game 4, 10-4 to even it up. Tigers win Game 5, 3-1. And this time the Cardinals have to go back to Detroit and win both games of in Briggs Stadium. And they win Game 6 to set up Game 7. They win 4-3 with Paul Dean winning his second game in the series. Dizzy won the other 2. So the Dean brothers amassed 4 of the wins. And Dizzy, of course, did lose one of the games. He actually lost Game 5, 3-1. But here's the setup. In this game, the Cardinals overwhelmed the Tigers, kind of like the Royals in '85 doing it to the Cardinals after a tough one. But in this game, Pepper Martin, in the last inning, I think people were throwing all kinds of garbage. Tiger fans were throwing all kinds of garbage at the Cardinals, to the point where they had to replace, I always thought, Pepper Martin. But anyway, it turned into a real brawl or a real riot where the umpires threatened a forfeit, even though they were winning 11-0. And all the runs really started in this. The top 5 plays. Frankie Frisch double, which scores Dizzy Dean, Pepper Martin, and Rothruck. So 3 runs, a 3-run double. Then it was Bill Delancey hitting to a double play. Then it was Ripper Collins off Schoolboy Rowe, scoring Frankie Frisch on a single. Then Bill Delancey off Schoolboy Rowe, doubling to score Collins. And then it was Pepper Martin ripping a single to short, and Dean went over to third. And I'm pretty sure, even though Baseball Reference doesn't have it here, but I'm pretty sure there was a threat of moving Pepper Martin, or he had to be I know what it was. Joe Medwick was replaced, and Chick Fullis was replaced him in left field. I apologize. But it was this. Martin had two steals. Joe Rothrock had 2 steals. There was a called stealing by of Ernie Orsatti, but the Cardinals just overwhelmed them. They scored 7 runs in the third and then hooked up with 2 more runs in the sixth and the seventh to beat them. The Tigers 11-0 with 17 runs. And that was the big thing I always remember. It was Joe Medwick in left who had to be replaced by Chick Fullis. And actually, it was a brilliant move because Fullis got a base hit. And Fullis, just for that year, just wanted to see this. Fullis in 1940, he would play for the Giants, the Phillies, and then his 2 years in St. Louis, including 34. Came in basically was a replacement player, good role player, had 199 at-bats, 21 runs, 52 hits, hit a solid 261 with no homers, 26 RBIs. So he replaced the great Joe Medwick, who that year had 18 triples to lead the league, 18 home runs, and 106 RBIs, and hit 319. And Medwick, of course, is a Hall of Famer. He was an MVP, a Triple Crown winner, the last one in the National League, as a matter of fact, 10-time All-Star. He finished with a 54.4 WAR, 205 homers, a 324 average. But his big thing was driving in runs. He led the league 3 times in RBIs and had 6 years where he drove in 100 runs for the Cardinals. So that was the 1934 World Series. Let me go back to another World Series as we're getting close to an end. And you know what? I think because it's the Hot Stove League, season has begun, and I'm waiting for pro football to really get a couple of more pieces of the puzzle in place in terms of the playoffs. Maybe I'll spend a little time next week with this. Last one I want to do before I leave is 65, a salute to Koufax and the LA Dodgers, who had really put in a heck of a run there. You know, they move out right after 56. They get to their first World Series representing LA in 59 and beat the White Sox in 6. They have good teams in 60 and 61 and 62. In fact, they lose to the Giants in that playoff 2-1, which counted as the regular season. They come back. They beat the Yankees, sweep them in 63, something they were unable to do in all the years in Brooklyn. And then in 65, 66, let me get there, their last run with Koufax on the Hill and Drysdale. They go down in 4 straight to the Baltimore Orioles in a game, in a series where the Oriole pitching just dominated, led by Mo Drabowski. I think the Dodgers scored a total of like 2 or 3 runs. But the 65 one is memorable because Sandy Koufax is the MVP. And, of course, Koufax took time off for religious, I think it was Yom Kippur, and left the team in order to practice his faith, but does rally and comes back and loses game 2, 5-1 to the Twins, but then rallies, comes back and wins game 5, 7-0. He beat Jim Cott in that hookup. And then, 3 days rest because that was October 11th. Game 7 was played on October 14th. Basically, they always like to say 2 days rest, okay? And this would be the 3rd day. He defeats Minnesota 2-0, and I think it's a memorable Game 7 because he does go against Jim Cott for a second time, who would finally make the Hall of Fame. Cott, though, only lasted 3 innings, gave up 2 runs, both earned, and then it was pitching by committee by Sam Mealy. Al Worthington comes in, Johnny Clipstein comes in, Jim Merritt, who would come back for the Reds, and Jim Perry, who would win a Cy Young with the Twins in 1970, all pitched flawless shutout ball. They only gave up 2 hits over the last 6 innings to the Dodgers. Meanwhile, here's what Koufax did on 2 days rest. 9 innings pitched, 3 hits, 3 walks, 10 strikeouts. And in the final, let's say in the 9th inning, he gets Tony Oliva the ground out. Harmon Killebrew singled. He gets Earl Batty, good player, to strike out looking. And he gets Bobby Allison, a solid player, strike out looking to end the game. Tying run at the bat, he throws 2 strikeouts, or earns 2 strikeouts. The great Sandy Koufax. Hey, this is Will O'Toole thanking you for letting me enter your homes and entertain you and hopefully educate you on great, and this will be part 1, great Game 7s of the World Series. Shout out to Howard Fredericks for all his help producing the show. See you next week with another edition.